So in this video, I'm going to talk about whether it's better to invest in the US or Singapore. I was born and raised here in Singapore, and like all of my friends, I wanted to retire as early as possible. But in order to do that, I needed to learn about this huge complicated world of investing. Then comes the dilemma. Should I invest in my own country, or should I invest in another country like the US, which everybody says has historically higher returns? I honestly didn't know which to choose, so I decided to run my own experiment and do both. I invested over $100,000 of my own hard-earned money over the last 3 to 5 years, trying to see which would make me into the next Bill Gates of the century. So hopefully at the end of this video, you'll be able to find out which country you should invest in and what my investing strategy is going to look like for the next 10 to 20 years moving forward. So let's first talk about investing in Singapore. When I say investing in Singapore, I mean specifically investing into Singapore stocks. The rationale on why I really like investing into Singapore stocks was because of a few reasons. Number one is that it's the country that I grew up in and I'm most familiar with it, so how in the world can I not invest in my own country? We gotta support local, man. Gotta contribute back to the country. But honestly, we're quite lucky to be born in Singapore where there's peace and abundance everywhere we go. You will never run out of food or water, and the government keeps the country relatively stable and safe. The keyword is relatively compared to other countries. Because of that, Singapore stocks are very stable compared to the US, where people are a bit more YOLO and outspoken so that the stocks don't fluctuate that much. I mean, just look at Tesla's stock price since Elon Musk entered the government. It fell all the way from $500 all the way down to $200, which is totally crazy. You won't see that in Singapore stocks, or rather the more stable Singapore stocks. You won't really see something like that unless there's a global pandemic that happened. So obviously Singapore offers this level of peace and stability, knowing that if you invested in the right stocks, you will not see such a big dip in your investment portfolio. Number two is that Singapore does not have any capital gain or dividend taxes. This was a super plus point because US has a 30% dividend tax, which just eats up a lot of your gains over the long run. Who wants to give away free money when you can just keep them all for yourself, right? Honestly, I would much rather you just keep the money instead of giving it away. Like 30% is a lot of money that you can give away. Imagine you investing over the next 20-30 years and 30% of those gains taken compounded over such a long period of time. That's a lot of money you're giving away. When I entered the Singapore stock market, I wanted to experience how it would feel like to invest into dividend stocks. This was honestly quite an interesting experiment for me because it meant that I was finally diving into the world of passive income. Everybody loves passive income. Everybody wants to not work and still be able to earn money. But this is one of the ways that you can really learn leverage, because over time you realize as you're working at your full-time jobs, you are actually trading time for money. Now you're actually using money to earn money. So that's another form of leverage. You're making your capital work for you instead of you just working for your capital in that sense. All I really had to do was buy into these stocks and they will pay me annually without me doing anything. However, I had a couple of criteria for these stocks. I wanted them to have at least 5% dividend yield, and I wanted them to be stable stocks that didn't have too much of stock price movement. I decided to invest into CapitaLand Mall REITs, Ascendas REITs, and DBS Bank stock because they hit these few criteria. I invested around $60,000 over a period of 2 years, slowly dollar cost averaging in most months, and of course buying more whenever the market falls drastically for some big ass gains. I now keep my investment portfolio, which consists of Singapore and US stocks, in just two brokers, which is the Momo Singapore app and the Longbridge Singapore app that I recently opened for the new user promotion. If you guys want to check it out, you can click on the link down below in the description box to check either one of them out. However, even though it has been a fun journey, I've since sold away my position in both CapitaLand Mall REITs and Ascendas REITs because they have appreciated enough and I want to make better use of my money. I earned around $1,000 plus from selling CapitaLand Mall REITs, but Ascendas REITs I only sold away for a very modest small loss. It's close to break-even price. I just wanted to quickly sell it away so that I could rotate my money out of the Singapore stocks. But overall, in terms of dividends, I think over the last two year plus, I've earned around $4,813 over this period of time. It's honestly quite nice to be receiving dividends annually because it really just feels like free money that gets paid out to you on top of your salary without you having to do anything at all. In fact, 2 months ago was my biggest dividend payout where I earned over $1,000 that month from just dividend payouts. I'm still holding DBS Bank stock, but only at a very small position, and I might consider selling it in the future if I want to make better use of that money. The reason I'm selling my Singapore stocks is also because I want to rotate my money into the US stock market since the recent market drop, which brings us to investing into the US stock market. If you guys have been following my channel or the recent news, you would know that Donald Trump recently imposed taxes on the whole world, and that brought in so much chaos. I'm not too much of a political person, but I do like it when it affects the stock market severely and I see a golden opportunity to buy more stocks at a cheap price. The whole US stock market fell like almost 30% within just a couple of days, and that was my signal to finally rotate my money out of Singapore and to buy into US stocks. Because US stocks are a bit more unstable, you'll see like 50% drops that happen like in Tesla's case, but the argument is also the same for the other side. It's not uncommon to see 30 to 50% increase in stock price when you invest into proper US stocks as well. So even though the downside is a lot more than Singapore stocks, so is the upside. Hell, one of my biggest regrets was not investing into Tesla during the pandemic years, because Tesla 10x from where it dropped. It was literally, if I don't remember wrongly, it was a V-shaped recovery because the government was just printing so much money to give to the citizens. So everybody just poured that all the way back into the stock market, and that's why the stock market recovered almost instantly and even boomed from there, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. That's not something that you see very often in Singapore stocks. Now, investing in the US is a bit more interesting because I do different types of investing in the US stock market. I have 3 separate portfolios. Number 1 is just investing into the S&P 500, which is an index fund that encompasses all of the US biggest stocks. Second is investing into individual US stocks. And thirdly, I sell options every month to earn passive income to some extent. The thing that's really changed over the last few years is that investing in the US stock market was previously quite expensive and difficult process to go through. Now with brokers like Moomoo and Longbridge, it's honestly super easy to get access to stocks from different countries without any difficulties at all. I'm not too sure about some of the other countries, like India, Japan. I'm not sure if these are markets that you want to get into, but you can really check them out on these kind of brokers. The first S&P 500 portfolio is relatively small, and I've invested around $14,000, and with capital gains and all, it's sitting around $20,000 plus, which is very decent gains for the last 5 years or so. The second portfolio I keep in the Moomoo Singapore app, which is the individual stocks. I hold 3 US stocks, which are Alibaba, Nvidia, and Tesla. I've invested around $50,000 amongst these 3 stocks. Tesla and Baba, I started to buy them some time ago, I think roughly around 3 to 4 years ago, but they've all since appreciated quite nicely. Baba only boomed recently because of the recent bull run, but it was dying so badly for the last few years. The most interesting is actually Nvidia, which I bought in around $20,000 of this into this tariff recession-ish market. That was where I rotated most of my money from selling the Singapore stocks and buying into Nvidia. I'm super impressed with the functions of AI, and I see a super big market for it, and after just using it for a while, I realized, it's super big game changer. That's why I wanted to invest in a stock that invests heavily into AI and is the leading AI stock right now. I might be wrong, but it has nicely appreciated almost 30% now that the whole tariff situation seems to have set up quite nicely. Damn late, right? So there was so much hoo-ha over the tariffs in the last couple of weeks, and I honestly thought I was looking forward to another big drop in the market so that I can accumulate more S&P 500 and Nvidia stock at even lower price. But now that the market has recovered to almost pre-tariff levels already. The last portfolio I have is selling options in the US stock market. This one is the most risky and takes the most amount of money to do so. I use around $60,000 to sell options on Nvidia, Baba, and Tesla. I just recently increased the position size, and I'm selling options on Tesla right now, and I'm still testing out some strategies that I will share on the channel in due time. If they don't do well, I'ma just keep quiet about it. I'm just joking, I'll still talk about it. You guys love to see my biggest failures on YouTube, right? It makes fantastic content whenever I talk about how much money I'm losing, how much my biggest failures are. People love to know about these kind of things. But with all the differences that we have just mentioned between the US and Singapore stock market, what does my future investing strategy look like? I think for you guys who are new to investing, it's not a bad idea to start off and dip your toes into more stable stocks in the Singapore stock market first. Once you're a bit more experienced, then you can move on to individual stocks in the US stock market. However, if you're super lazy like me and you don't want to learn anything about the stock market, which is totally fine, no judgment from me, you can just invest blankly into the S&P 500. I'm currently doing so through Interactive Brokers, buying a fund called CSPX, which is perfect for Singaporeans. My initial plan was honestly to slowly dollar cost average and buy more Nvidia all the way to $50,000, so that it becomes a relatively big bet in my portfolio. If AI continues to grow even more, it's even possible to see another 10x return, which will bring back a very nice $500,000 into my investment portfolio. However, I might have to rethink this strategy now because the market has recovered so aggressively all of a sudden after the tariffs. I might still buy a bit of Nvidia here and there, but the main thing I want to focus on will be S&P 500 investing from here on out. I'll invest at least $2,000 a month routinely no matter what happens to the market and grow this portfolio. It gives around 8 to 10% returns, so if I stop doing this at around 50 to 60 years old, which is not that far from me, I'm actually pretty old already, I will be able to grow it to around $2 million, which is pretty nice for retirement. Once I have that, I can either rotate it into stable dividend stocks that pay me nice dividends every month, or I can just let it continue to compound in the S&P 500 ETF. Either way, it's a pretty solid way to get myself set up for the future and my retirement. Investing is honestly a super big step for anyone, and because there are so many so-called gurus out there that claim that they can teach you to earn thousands and millions of dollars and quit your job, people can get quite skeptical of it. Maybe now I'm one of those gurus that people hate. Just joking, I'm just sharing my own experience. You guys can choose to follow or not, but hopefully I help you guys save some money and earn more outside of your job. If you enjoyed this video here, then you'll probably enjoy this video here on how to trade options as a beginner on the Moomoo Singapore app. Thanks for watching, have an amazing day as usual, and I'll see you guys in the next few videos. Bye bye.